One thing I talk about a lot, as you guys probably know, is I don't think it's good to overcomplicate your cooking. And when you start to make it more efficient and less complicated, you may actually find that you enjoy it and that you have more time to do it. Now, when it comes to that, I also want to talk to you a little bit about cooking with common sense. Now, that sounds simple enough, but I think sometimes when you're in the heat of the moment, see what I did there? It actually is harder than you realize because you're kind of in the middle of it and all of a sudden your onions are burning and you don't know what to do and you're freaking out and you're kind of trying to glance at the recipe, but your phone is turned off and you accidentally X'd out of it and the world is burning down around you, or it seems that way. So I think when it comes to cooking, it's really important to take it back to common sense. And now what do I mean by that? Well, the first thing I think is to remember that you have 5 senses available to you, and oftentimes we forget to use those senses when it comes to cooking, okay? So we have sight. What does it look like when the food is cooking? What are the signs that you're seeing from the food that it might be ready to move on to the next step, that it may be overcooked, that it's not cooked enough yet, that your sauce may not be thick enough, that you might need to add a little bit more water to that glaze because it's a little bit gelatinous. By taking some visual cues from the food you're making, that also might give you a direction where you can go when you're cooking it. Another thing to think about is smell. What are you smelling? Does it smell like it's burning? You know, that's usually a good sign to take it out of the oven or to move it off of the heat. What about hearing? You know, what if you're heating some oil so that you can sear some salmon and you drop a little drop of water in there and it doesn't, and you don't hear a sizzle? That's usually a sign that the oil is not hot enough. And so you know to let it get a little hotter. You're using your sense of hearing to do that. Your sense of touch, you know, are you touching your steak and you find that it's still not cooked enough, it's not as firm as you want, so you want to keep cooking a little bit more? How do they feel? How does the sauce feel? You know, does it feel like it needs to be thicker? Does it feel hot enough? And then there's taste. When it comes to eating, this is one of the most important senses you have. Always, always, always taste your food. You may find that for your particular taste, you want it with a little more salt or a little more citrus added to it to liven it up a little bit. I think it's super important to taste your food before you serve it, because here's the thing, we all have different palates. So even though I wrote a recipe that I think is just perfect for my particular taste, you may be somebody that has a palate that wants saltier food. So you're gonna taste that and say, oh, it's a little bland, I need to add a little salt to that. And you can add it and know that it's seasoned the way your family wants it to be, or vice versa. You know, you may be tasting it as you go along and realize you need to add something else to cut through that. But when you start getting in touch with using your 5 senses instead of just 1 or 2 senses when you're cooking, you actually end up not even needing a recipe when you're cooking because you're able to kind of go with the flow on what's happening.